everybody, and welcome to Tea Time with Jesse, a very special episode of Tea Time with Jesse, live from Dongding Mountain in Taiwan. I'm here with Jayme.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm very glad to be able to introduce Jayme because Jayme's family is the tea provider for our Taiwan Mystery Box. I was just up in the tea mountains with her and went to her workshop with her family. They have a special type of charcoal roasting method that we're going to be talking about. And I'm just very excited to be able to have an actual tea person on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you.
So Jayme, tell us real quickly about yourself. How did you get into tea and how did you find your way here?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jayme. So my family originally is from Dongding, and we just been expanding over Taiwan in different tea regions, and now we also grow tea on Teatime Mountain at 2,000 meters. Do I have to talk about the whole journey?
No,
it's going to be long. We will cover that later.
We'll get into it once we start drinking the tea, but I just wanted to say it was an unexpected and very pleasant thing to be able to have a tea person who is actually able to speak English and do a whole podcast interview. I was 我以为我们还得配上中文字幕。
中文也是可以的。
中文也是可以的，但是我们省一点麻烦，我们还是说英文。Yeah. So we'll speak English for the interview, but it's been great to be able to go back and forth and to have somebody who has experience getting tea culture outside of Taiwan. You've sold to Michelin star restaurants, and it's really good to find someone who knows that intercultural aspect. It was more than I expected, and I'm very glad to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much. So let's get drinking some tea and talking about your story. And what tea should we drink first?
Today, we're going to start with one of the tea that we're going to have in the mysterious box that we're going to cover.
So this is really nice. So this is a charcoal roasted, and one of the cool things about these charcoal roasted oolongs that you guys do is that it's a like 老工艺, like an old traditional technique that your family is one of the last people doing it, right?
Yeah, I would say it's an old artisanal craft because it requires so much work and so much time. It's very time consuming. You have to be there the whole day. You have to flip the tea every 20 minutes. And that truly is very different from the electric roasting tea.
So very cool. So I'm excited to try this. And this is one of 4 teas that we're going to be having. This is roasted to a level 2 out of 5, you said, right?
Exactly.
So could you explain to people your roasting technique and how you do the roasting, what the numbers are?
Yeah. So it will be hard to get a common language among all of the tea consumers and also the tea makers using, this is light, this is heavy. So we sort of just divided tea roasting level into 1 to 5. And each time it's roasted for 8 hours as our circle. But if this tea is roasted for 5 times, it doesn't mean it's roasted for 40 hours straight, non-stop. It means that this tea get roasted once for 8 hours and then get some days of resting because all of the Taiwanese oolongs, most of the oolongs are rolled into bowl shape, and all of these bowl shaped oolong, the stem is wrapped inside the leaves. The leaves is the most thinnest part of the tea. So when you're roasting tea, at the beginning, you're only roasting the surface. So in order for the stem has the most water. So for the water to come back to the leaves again, for the leaves to be flexible again for you to work with, you have to let it rest for a little bit. It's just like everyone needs a break.
Everyone needs a break. Right? That's great. Well, let's drink this and get going with it.
Yes.
So very excited. The oolong in Taiwan is really one of the things that they're most famous for, and it's what I was really excited about coming here. So when I came, I told everybody I'd be doing a mystery box. I really didn't know what I was going to do, but my hope was that I'd be able to get a couple different styles. And so I've been very happy that we're going to have 4 teas in the box, and this is going to be one of them with the tea from your guys' mountain, and then the charcoal roasting method from your family. So very excited. So let's see here. What are you looking for when you are making this tea? What are you doing?
So first, I will warm up all the tea vessels, and then I pop in the leaves. And I'll give it a little shake.
Nice.
So you can smell the aroma.
This is good. So this is after you've warmed up the lidded cup.
窑香. This
窑香.
is to wake up the tea, and you can feel the aroma.
And it's got that roasty aroma flavor, which is very nice. The part of our choosing of this tea, and I don't know if the video blog has come out by the time this aired. I think it probably will have, but we went through a tasting process where we tasted the leaves unroasted, roasted at level 2, and roasted at level 3. And I think the 2 was really the winner, where it's still really easy drinking, but it has that roasty flavor in it.
Yeah, exactly. Which
one do you personally like out of the 1 to 5?
As I always say, there's no best tea. There's only teas that fits you the best. I think I also like the second one because I think the third one is for people who are more into more roasted tea, and you can feel more roast than the tea. Where I think this is a great balance between the tea and the roast.
Nice, awesome. So yeah, it really is a personal choice. I mean, I was talking to one of the shushus up on the mountain that we were talking with. This tea farmer. He's been doing this for 30 years. And I asked him, what was his favorite tea? And immediately he was like, well, my favorite tea is just going to be for me. Everybody's going to have their own type of tea to be able to make. And it's good to hear, even at like the really high levels of people who have been drinking tea over and over every day. Even then, they're like, you really do have to try it yourself and find what you like.
Yeah.
So when you first got into tea, I guess you would have been very, very young. Like, when were you first drinking tea?
I think there's no really like an official date that I get into tea because I was born into the family.
You were just born and then dunked in the tea, like,
yeah.
洗一下,
like in tea.
洗一下孩子.
Yeah. If you cut my hand, it will be bleeding with tea.
Yeah.
Tea family, it's in the blood.
It's in the blood. So you grew up around the tea mountains. You grew up in the tea mountains, and so what was that like?
Actually, my direct family, my mom and my grandparents, the one that are tea making family, that is my grandparents, they grew up making tea in Dongding. And my grandma is the city girl. She did not like the farming life. And my grandpa, he's the farming guy. He liked the countryside. Nice. And when they got married, they actually got matchmaking. So
they got a matchmaker.
They only met each other sort of at an engagement.
Oh, wow. Oh, so they had like an arranged marriage.
Yeah, it was very arranged. And my grandma actually, I don't know if I can
say this. There's a lot of
tea.
There's a lot of tea.
Grandma had a boyfriend in Taipei back in the days because she liked the city. But grandma's family say, no, you have to marry this man because he's got tea mountains.
Oh, wow.
So that's why.
That's funny.
They got married, and then grandma absolutely just wasn't a big fan of farming, but they still knew how to make tea back in the days, and then they moved to Taipei. And so when I grew up, I will always come back to Dongding whenever I will have vacations at school. And then whenever I come back, it's always tea and tea before meal, after meal, before sleep.
Yeah.
Even when you wake up, it's like tea is water for us.
Yeah.
There isn't a set time that we set for tea. It's just anytime.
This is my favorite thing about hanging around the tea mountains as a tea guy. In America, I drink more tea than 99.99% of people. But then I come to the tea hills and they're just always drinking tea. No matter what time it is, somebody's sitting at the table, somebody's making the tea.
But hey, let's take a moment. It smells so good.
Really nice. Yeah, the roastiness really comes out there. How would you describe the scent?
Right. I like that nuttiness. And it also has that creaminess.
Yeah.
It's very sweet in general. Like before I opened the lid, I could already smell the tea.
Yeah. What can you tell? Like, can you tell whether it's been roasted well or roasted badly just by the scent?
By the scent, it's kind of hard, but by smelling this, the brewed tea, it can tell you a lot about what happened in the garden and also what happened in the production processing.
So what are you looking for when you're smelling the brewed tea for the first time to show you that it's good quality?
So after you brew the tea, you open the lid and you smell, there will be steam coming up and you will get like a smash in the face kind of fragrance. But the first impression might be deceiving, so you have to get deeper, like after the steam is gone, and you really just have to, usually there's a differences between when you just lightly breathing inhale and when you do exactly.
The big boy.
Yeah, and it smells very different, so you can try that.
Oh yeah,
Like you feel much more because the timing, like the time of you inhaling is
It
much
stays
longer.
in there longer.
So you get layers of fragrance, and also
really good.
yeah, it just gets deeper. But
So here we go. Cheers. Thank you. Here you put- That's nice. We've drunk a lot of really good tea today, so this, yeah, it's this is what makes this, like, you know, when you drink that this tea, what's its like special qualities for you?
for me, I enjoy when there is still the freshness of tea in the back of your throat. That it has to still feel juicy at the back. Even our most roasted, heaviest roast, you still should feel that juiciness, 回甘 afterward, and I would know that is a good roast because our tea are roasted very slowly. Some other people might have a higher temperature, and that might give you higher fragrance, but in general, as I say, you roast the leaves a lot, and inside there's still water. So in the long term, it's not as good for storage. But when you roast tea slowly, it penetrates all into the tea, into the core of the tea, and as well as the stem.
So is this the sort of tea that if you had, like, say, exposed to air, it won't be as bad as if you had like those fast roasted teas exposed to air?
In fact, I would say starting from our medium roast, I will even recommend opening the pack for a day or two, just to let it wake up.
Wow.
Just to, you know, it's like when you open a bottle of wine, you put in the decanter.
That's good. Well, I mean, it also shows confidence in the quality, because a lot of the lighter oxidized oolongs, I know that they have like lots of like clips and stuff. You want to keep the air out, keep the air out, keep the air out. But if you can get it like with all the water gone, then you don't need to worry about that. So that's one of the benefits, again, of the slower roast. So
Yeah.
very cool. Let's go back to your personal story about how you did tea. So you grew up sort of having tea all around you, and then when did you decide to sort of become a tea person? Was it while you were in China, or was it, I remember you said you had studied abroad?
It was very funny because, to be honest, I grew up in the tea family, but I was not interested in tea. It's just like water. It's like nothing special. It's like, you know, this table is like, okay, I noticed that. I knew how to brew tea growing up. It's just like, it'll taste. It's just tea to me. I didn't feel anything connected to tea, but I knew it was something. It was something that is in my everyday life. But I wasn't that interested in it. And then until I took a gap year traveling around Southeast Asia and Europe. And actually, as a Taiwanese person, you don't have to be tea person, but I think even tea person will think like the Western herbal blends is so cool. Like we'll find those really nice tin jar with a lot of herbal, like flowers, fruits.
So you were really curious about the herbal blends.
Yeah, I think in general, Taiwanese people would think that, oh, these herbal blends are really fancy because it's so pretty, it's got colors. So I was one of them.
Oh yeah.
And so I went to different shops and just smell. It all smelled really good. Like when they open that tin, and then you're like, oh, this fragrance smells really good. But when I took it home, and when I actually brew it, it didn't taste much. And I realized, wait, maybe some of them were artificially flavored.
Yeah.
So they were not natural flavor.
That's part of the big thing that, like, a lot of people in the Western tea shops are used to, like, opening up, oh, that smells so amazing, I want to take that back. And then a lot of it's they spray scented oil on it, right?
Yeah, I think honestly, one of the things that people see more commonly is milky oolong. So in Western tea shop, a lot of time, some places you go, when you buy milky oolong, I would say, when you open the tin and it smells like caramel, like toffee candy, very dense. I would say a lot of times it's artificially sprayed with
because
perfume.
either it's like the best in the world, or they were spraying stuff on it to make it smell good.
Yeah, because the real milky oolong is actually coming from the Jinshen cultivar itself. That at the back, it has that silky, creamy milkiness, but it's not like oh, it tastes like milk.
Yeah.
And it definitely wasn't steamed with milk during the production.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we're going to have a Jinshuan oolong, milk oolong in the box,
natural
right?
one.
A natural one. So if you want the real one that came from the mountain and was processed right and is not sprayed with stuff, that's going to be one of the ones in the set, which I think people are really going to like because that's even lighter and crisper than this one, which is roasted. So very, very cool. So you kind of, it sounds like you almost discovered how good the Taiwanese tea was when you left, and then you realized that a lot of those herbal blends didn't give you repeatable steeps, and was that sort of a reason to go back and start re-investigating your own tea?
It was probably after I realized some of these herbal blends, they were perfume, and I realized, oh, my family's tea is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Because like you grow up getting used to this tea and you just think it's okay, but then you actually went outside and see other things. It's like, oh, Taiwanese tea in general are pretty good. And at that time, I was living in Sweden, and one of the tea shop owners say, oh, Taiwanese oolong are really good, but it's really hard for us to get it. And so I started selling tea.
Oh, wow. So there we go.
Yeah, so when you start selling something, you gotta understand more. So I started reading books and actually got more into tea because I needed to sell it. I needed to.
Well, you gotta know what you're talking about. Then.
Exactly.
So then, was it like, how did you learn how to describe tea to the Westerners? Because this is like a huge problem that I have, is that when you're speaking with Chinese people that have drunk a lot of tea, you can kind of make these comparisons. Oh, it's a hong cha, it's a red tea, it's an oolong, it's something like that. Even people that don't know a lot about tea will know more than regular people outside of China. But then once you get to these places, like, how do you talk to Swedish people about tea?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's very interesting. We all speak different language in tea. Production people and customers. Like for customer, we will speak food languages. We will say, oh, this tastes like banana, this tastes like mango. But for production people, we have to speak in a language. We cannot use food to describe tea. We have to speak very technical language. We will say, oh, this is oxidized at this level. This is roasted to this level. We are a bit more technical, but that's two different languages.
Do you feel like one of the languages is more true?
I don't think necessarily that it's more true. It's just what helps you understand better.
Because if you were a tea roaster and you're like, I want more banana, they would have no idea what to do, right?
This story happened when I was learning tea with because I was learning how to kill green, chaoqing, and because I actually learned the Western tasting notes, how to describe tea notes in more of a, because in Taiwan we don't really describe tea notes with food that much. We would say, oh, this is floral, this is fruity, this is honey. But in Western world, you are more niche
leather,
into, like a BMW car.
Yeah. It's like,
I actually do it because I love to smell things. And for me, different cars smell different.
BMW is like you're about to drink it and it cut you off. and that's what the BMW
is like a total drift and it tastes different.
The BMW
when something's stuck in your mouth, you're like,
stuck in your mouth and you
just kidding. But it does smell a little bit different.
We were actually hating on BMW people all day. Driving up the mountain, this BMW guy zoomed in front of our car and almost hit an oncoming motorcycle. And just saying, if you drive a BMW, you're probably a great customer of mine. So I'm not talking about you, but for everybody else, anyway. But this is the thing though, is like, it's a total cultural thing to describe things as cars. I actually get that. I'm always looking for ways to be able to describe it because it taste is so personal. Exactly.
I think taste is very personal. So the story was that I would speak to my master who told me how to kill green. I was like, this tastes like papaya milk. And he would tell me, don't speak to me like that.
Don't talk.
He was kind of mean, but he said, I would not understand. I would not accept this language.
Don't talk to me like that.
Yeah. It's as if you're being disrespectful.
Yeah. So he was like angry. He was like,
no, because he told me he's a very nice master and I respect him a lot. Yeah. But he told me that my papaya milk and your papaya milk is different. You know how milk in different places actually tastes different.
不够准确。
Yeah. So each person's like you would say, oh, this smells like cinnamon, but there are so many different kinds of cinnamon.
Yeah.
So usually when I do is when I go to a new country, I will start smelling things around, especially flowers. Because in Taiwan, when you're buying high mountain oolong, a lot of time people like to use orchid as a description of tea, but you don't have orchid in Western world, right?
If you're not in a place that knows what an orchid smells
like
or
orchid,
tastes
osmanthus, or lychee, mango, depending on the regions. Like if I tell you orchid, you probably can't associate that well. So like,
or it might be like vague. It might be like you're giving somebody a really good tea, but because the word you use to help them is something they're like, okay, orchid is a flower. I'm just getting flower. I don't know specifically what the orchid is. Whereas if you have like, you know, a different specific word for those people, it will really be helpful.
Yeah, so for my advice is for tea people who want to discuss tea notes with people from other cultures. You know, try each other's
food. Yeah, that's a really good point because you said it here, like lychee. Like I was surprised. I went on my last trip to Beijing. I bought some lychees at a fruit store. And I took a picture of them and put them on my Instagram, and we got a couple people who were like, what are those? They didn't know what they were. And so it wouldn't be helpful for me to describe it as lychee. It's one of the problems I feel like sometimes people in the fancy food world will intentionally use words that other people are not going to know. Because that way they're like,
what's the point of that?
I know, but this is what drives me crazy. It's like it doesn't do any good to describe it like that if it's not helpful, you know? So you would go and you would try to smell what the cinnamon in a certain place smells like, or smell what the flowers in a certain place smells like.
I would go on the street and see what's the most common flower. Like some areas could be like gardenia. I think gardenia is easy for people to understand. Or rose. These are like easier.
I know what a rose is. Yeah. I'm a little bit tied into the flower world myself. But the being able to help people do that tasting is a big part of getting people into the higher level tea.
Yeah, but at the same time, when people are on my tea table, I actually do not like to talk about tea tasting notes. I don't like to guide people through tasting notes because tasting notes is so personal. And it's very interesting. Like I can tell you like, oh, there's mango. And you will search every single part of mango. It could be the mango skin. It could be the core of mango. It could be the meat of mango that you will try to associate with mango. And then that will sort of guide you towards that tasting
Because I have a question, because we give 4 tasting notes usually on each tea card that comes with our thing. And those tasting notes I just make myself, you know. I wish I had more adjectives. People who have repeatedly had our teas notice like a lot of honey shows up, a lot of floral shows up. But I also, I did that because people really wanted them. But I also felt a little bit in the same way, like, you know, it is a little bit of a shame if I'm going to be giving this tea to somebody for the first time and influencing the way they drink it. And I wouldn't do it except that we're an online tea house, and so I don't get the chance to sit down with people and answer questions. So some people really want to know that, and so it's there for them. But if you guys want to ignore my tasting notes, like, do it. I'm not any sort of like giant expert in adjectives for tasting notes.
I think when you firstly get into tea, you want to have guidance. And I would also recommend, even though you have the cards, try to sip on the tea without any guidance first, and then you can open the card. But these are necessarily the correct answer, because there's no correct answer on tasting notes, because it's very personal.
Yeah, and same with the steep times and temperatures, would you say? Steep time, temperatures, I notice, a lot of people in the West are familiar with coffee. Strict. Well, yeah, and I think for coffee it makes sense. I'm not a big coffee guy either, but I've heard for coffee if you pour the tea, if you steep it too long or you're getting too long of an extraction, that can be bad for the coffee. For tea, it really, for me, it's always been a little bit more about touch and personal taste. Do you feel like the steep times and temperatures also kind of like the tasting notes are kind of just do what you want, or is that more specific?
I feel like there's always a range that you can play with. Like our heaviest chocolate roasted oolong, that is also gonna be in the box. When you brew it lighter, am I allowed to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can say, there's no more spoilers. This is the launch video if you haven't noticed. Yeah, we will have all the info up. By the time this launches, all of the info on all the teas will be up on the shop. But yes.
Don't want to spill the
We are, I'm very excited about this. So you're talking about the highest roasted charcoal.
So I think tea is very interesting because depending on how you brew it, what vessel you brew it in, what temperature, even what kettle that you, like what kind of fire, like electric or charcoal, that all changes the taste of your tea. So of course, like steep time and also proportion and also temperature, that is one thing to play with, and they can be all very different. But I think good tea is very forgiving, and I think that's why you should always have good tea.
Yeah, this is it seems funny, but the better tea you get, the harder it is to mess up. We did tastings today, and we can show some of the footage of that, where the way you recommend trying different types of teas and deciding which to buy involves overbrewing them by a lot. And that way you can really see if you've overbrewed the tea really badly and it's still good, you know the quality is at least at a certain level. And so that's something that I actually saw a lot here in Taiwan. We saw it at many different tea houses. And I kind of like the idea behind that, because it means like you can be very sure that if you get a good quality tea that, you can relax a bit. I think coffee, I don't know coffee, but for me it feels a little bit more like, zhaozi, like makes me nervous if I wasn't pouring it exactly the right time on my timer, whereas with the tea, it really can play to your own taste. And so I really encourage people to do that, because I get a lot of comments that are like, should I steep it at 95 degrees or 90? And I'm like, there's probably a way of doing both. Like that's not going to cause the tea to blow up and explode.
Yeah, honestly, I would say good tea, especially oolongs. All the teas that we have in the box, it's gonna withstand boiling temperature. So just whichever temperature, it's gonna brew out great.
Great. Before we get off of the subject of explaining tea to Westerners, I know that you have sold tea to Michelin restaurants before.
Right.
So how did that happen? How did you get the idea to do that, or how did you wind up getting tea into these really, really high-end restaurants?
So first it started in Sweden at the 3-star Michelin restaurant, and it was through my tea shop supplier, and they really liked the really specialty. They really enjoyed the shui xian, that is. Shui xian is a Chinese cultivar, but they brought it to Taiwan, and then it's grown on high mountain. It's chocolate roasted, and all these they really are seeking for uniqueness and something rare. And I think nowadays people, instead of wine pairing, I see a trend of doing tea pairing with food for people who don't want to consume alcohol during dinner time. And I think it's really nice to see this trend coming, and because that means the artisanal Taiwanese tea have another stage to shine, especially outside of Taiwan. Yeah. And it's very nice to see how tea can be transformed. Because I think tea in Taiwan sometimes is seen as a commodity, but I think tea is art. Because each batch is different depending on the day that it's made, the weather, the people, the soil, the terroir, and everything. It truly is art, because we are not gonna ever make the same tea again, even though it's just one day apart. Yeah,
I mean, even with aged teas, this is always it makes more sense to people. Like we would sell a 2005 tea on the website, and then when we sold out of it, we sold out. And I asked my tea guy, "Do we have any more?" He's like, "You drunk it all. It's gone."
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense with age. People get it with age, but they don't necessarily get it as much as like this crop that was made from this week during the spring of this time on this mountain once it's gone, it's gone. You can find stuff that's similar, but it's never going to be exactly the same.
Yeah, like as a tea maker, it's important to stay consistent in your quality and your style. But there's always a slight difference. You know, like it's possible to make about the same style. Like we can keep our roast at similar level, but it's never gonna be the same.
Yeah.
So if you like a batch, just buy it all.
Yeah. This is your cue to get it earlier rather than later. Although, you know, hopefully by working with good people, we'll be able to keep the quality consistent. But this is, I think, part of the reason why the big companies, the Liptons and those sort of, just grind everything together and then just have this really mass commodity sort of thing. Because if you're really trying, the moment you respect the tea enough to know that it's going to be different from batch to batch, it's hard to be in a grocery store. You know, like, you know, because people are like, they want to taste the exact same way every time. So
Exactly.
I think they probably, and I'm not an expert on this, but I bet they probably spend a lot of time and energy trying to make it taste the exact same way every time, because if you're a grocery store tea, that's what people want.
Exactly.
But I think that, you know, once we broaden our minds away from the grocery store tea, it's great to know that, like, you know, it makes this tea time even more special, you know? Because it's like, we might not get this again, even if we're buying, you know, a very similar tea or the same mountain. And so I really hope we get to that point in the West where, you know, I can feel comfortable saying, I have 2 teas from the same mountain. They taste different. Like right now, as a guy that makes online videos, it seems like an impossible thing to convince people that 2 teas from the same mountain taste different. But if you come up here on the mountain, we literally just had 3 teas from Ali
We
Shan.
had, well, before that, I had 7.
Yeah, she had 7.
Ali San Jinshen,
Yeah.
and I filter it down.
Yeah,
to
filter
3
it down
for
to
him
3.
choose from.
I tried the 3, and you could taste the difference between the 3, and they all had different stuff to them. And of course, everybody's going to have their own personality to it. But like, I think that that's one of those things that makes tea a mindful drink for me, because you don't want to just like, it's the exact opposite of like throw it in a mug and then you're done. That's what I really like about it. So you were getting into these Michelin restaurants. And what's it like to sell to a Michelin restaurant?
I think a lot of stories have. I think in Taiwan, people are very result based. At least in the more wholesale industry, people are very result based. Like brew the tea, and then we'll judge the price by how it tastes. But people sometimes forget about the stories behind the efforts, the time being put. Like my granduncle would stay at home all the time. He cannot leave the house more than 20 minutes because he'll have to come back and flip the tea.
Yeah.
And all these are, you know, not seeing stories. These stories should be seen, and people should shine light on these stories. And I think that's what makes it different. They really, Michelin restaurant, they love stories, and they love to tell stories behind these ingredients that they source from. Because this Michelin restaurant that I supply to in Ireland, they are Asian French fusion. So they want to only use Taiwanese tea, and they study the whole history for Taiwanese tea culture, and all of them try to memorize how to pronounce each tea master's name. That was very respect to that.
That's very cool.
Yeah, so I get really happy when people pay attention or willing to you know, give extra effort just to present these stories to the customers.
Yeah. Why do you feel like the stories are so important? Do you feel like without the story you can't taste the tea, or is it like, what makes you feel like the story of the tea is a really, like, you can't cut it out of drinking the tea?
I think in Taiwan it's because what I say about being result-based is that there are too many choices. There are too many people growing tea, and that you have too many to choose from. So it's very competitive.
Yeah.
So people forget about the stories.
Yeah.
But each farmer spends so much effort.
Yeah.
What they put in the soil, like some farmers put chemical soil, chemical fertilizer, some put organic fertilizer, and that comes out very different results. But if you just want Like sometimes in Taiwan, you will say, "Oh, I want this price," and see what you can get.
Yeah.
And I think people forget about the story behind that. And I think
it's very depressing as somebody that makes something to be like, you put in this extra effort and people are like, I don't have time for that. I'm gonna pay you that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what about like, can I tell you what I did? No. Like that's like, the last place you want to be as an artist. As an artist,
it's kind of like artists, and that's why I find tea is like art, because you really need to find the right people to appreciate it.
Very cool.
Just as I say, there's no best tea, only teas that fits you.
Nice.
Because like art is like the feeling of pretty. It's depending on the person. Like what I think pretty is not what you would think is
That's
pretty.
true. And so one last point on the Michelin, and then we're going to take a quick break. But do you feel like they have the skill, after all their research, did they have the skill to pick the right teas? Did they pick good ones? Or at the end of the day, was it really like you just have to give them the good stuff and they're not going to be able to tell?
It was a communication and also training and education on like what is best for your food, because they were doing food pairing. So they need to tell me which food, and I will think of a tea that will fit this food well. And
Can you give an example of like a tea that you paired to a food?
yeah, so exact like high mountain oolong, I will pair it with seafood because it has that really nice umami, and when you have it with scallops, it just
That would be good.
they're
It
best
has to be light because the high mountain oolong is not like, it's not punchy.
Or in the dessert, it's always nice to have black tea, especially when you have a honey black tea. They just sort of make, like they dance tango together. You feel layers.
That's really cool. Very cool. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with the second half and learn more about the traditional charcoal roasting method and have a really special high charcoal roasted tea. I'm Jesse.
I'm Jayme.
And we'll be right back.
It's time for battle with a new fun mobile game, Battle of Battles. Battle your friends, your enemies, and even other battles. And maybe after your 10th, 100th, or 1000th battle, you'll realize that violence doesn't really solve anything. So many battles. And what comes of it? More battles. It's like, we don't want to battle, but we don't know how not to battle. So if you're battling and don't want to battle, maybe try some really good tea, like Jesse's Tea House. Jesse gets his teas straight from small tea shops and tea farmers in China and puts them into his subscription service. Just use the code JessePod for $10 off your first order of $30 or more and stop this endless battling. God damn.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tea Time with Jesse. I'm Jesse here with Jayme from Taiwan.
Hi, everyone.
And Jayme, again, her family is going to be providing the teas for our Taiwan Mystery Box, which is no longer a mystery. You can find all of the information up on the website. We're going to have 4 different teas from different mountains around Taiwan, prepared by your family in different levels of roastiness, all the way from unroasted, very clear, clean, all the way up to what we're about to drink, which is a high roast, a deep roast. And the roasting style is also what caught me by surprise, because I had never tried anything like this. This is the traditional charcoal roasting method. Is that right?
Exactly. This is a bit more than traditional. This is more like a modern contemporary take on traditional techniques.
Yeah, so it's a really cool style, and I'm very excited to hear more about it. I actually just got a chance to go to your workshop and see your uncle, or granduncle? Granduncle. Actually show me the longan tree wood that he uses for the
charcoal.
The charcoal and the ashes that are used to cover up the heat. And why don't you give everybody an introduction of what we're about to drink and then the method used to make it?
Right, so everyone can have a look at this tea we're about to drink. This is the darkest roast that we have in our family collection of charcoal roasting tea. And it was charcoal roasted for 5 times over a period of 1 month. And each time after roasting, we let it rest for a bit. So the tea will be flexible to work with again.
So it takes a whole month to make a batch of this.
Yeah, and even after a whole month of working with it, we would let it rest for another some more time until we actually sell it.
Yeah, so this is the tea that if you're in the sampler box, we give everybody 10 grams of this. That's enough for 2 sessions. It's expensive and it's hard to make. Like I asked about it, I was like, how much of it can we get? And she's like, like there's not a
The
ton.
old man can't roast that much.
Exactly. It's literally like their own, like, you know, it's this guy who knows how to do this technique and him roasting it. And you're learning how to roast it as well, right?
I'm learning, but I don't think I'm that good enough to go this deep. Because when tea is this heavy roast, you really is just purely tasting the techniques from this roasting master. If it's a bad roasting, this tea is just gonna taste very burnt and not unpleasant. Because you are rarely gonna taste the tea itself, but the whole thing, like
The technique really shows
Yeah.
through. If you have bad technique, it's going to be very apparent.
exactly.
Very cool. Well, this is exciting. So let's make this and get going with it because I'm very excited to try this again. I tried the one sample that we had in the tea house in Taipei, and it was really unique. How would you describe the flavors that come out of a roasted oolong?
From roasted oolong, there are also two versions of roasting: electric roasting and charcoal roasting. And as my grand uncle said, that charcoal roasting tea, the Longian charcoal itself, gives extra brown sugar notes to tea, and electric roasting gives mostly nutty notes to tea. And I think that's different notes that from different roasting methods that it adds on to tea. But according to how heavy your roast is, it also gives different notes. For example, like this roast, it gives when you actually, also depending on how light or how strong you brew it. When this tea is brewed lightly, it tastes like cigar.
Very smoky.
Exactly. And when it's heavy roasted, it tastes more like a dark roasted coffee because all the fruity sourness brings out when you brew it stronger.
Very cool.
So I think this is a very interesting tea for coffee people who wants to get into the tea world.
Yeah, and we definitely have a lot of people, like I get a lot of comments asking that, and I usually recommend sort of like darker oolongs, Da Hong Pao or something like that, as like kind of, I mean, it doesn't taste quite like coffee. We also say shu pu'er, the really darker shu pu'er. I think part of that's just though because the coffee people want a lot of taste. They don't want sweet water.
This would be like an easier transition.
Yeah.
From
so
coffee.
yeah, and so this is also really cool because as a tea person myself, as I said, I've drunk a lot of tea, and so the first time that it wasn't even when I tasted the tea, it was the step we're about to do right now, where the gaiwan has been heated up, and then we give it a little bit of a shake, and then that shake starts to bring out the aroma of the tea leaves. This is the first time you're really going to smell the full impact there, and I'm looking forward to this again. Oh wow, yeah, it's like. It almost is like walking into a Starbucks a little bit. Like, you know, like, I don't know about
I hope
Starbucks.
it's better than a Starbucks.
No, better, but like as a
Yeah,
non-coffee guy, I smell that and I'm like, that doesn't immediately.
It's like
a
an Americano, like a
Yeah.
very dark roast, roasted coffee that you get in America actually.
Yeah, it's very cool because I'm a traditional apprentice to Chinese culture myself. I studied xiangsheng with Master Ding for 7 years, and it's definitely one of those things where a lot of these traditional cultural techniques, you need to learn them for years and years and years. You need a very subtle understanding of what is right and what is wrong, not because there's like right and wrong, but because without that expertise, you're really just copying other people. You're not really continuing the tradition. And so what did you first think of the charcoal roasting when you saw it growing up?
Let me try to recall.
Yeah.
Because growing up, back in the days, tea also tasted a little bit different. Back in the days, tea would have been more roasted than nowadays. Nowadays, because of high mountain oolong is the market trend, so all the teas are much lighter oxidized. Like Teguan will be lighter oxidized and lighter roasted too. So growing up, the tea were somewhere between the second roast to, in our tea box actually. That would have been the tea that we were more used to when I was little growing up, and I will just associate it with home.
Yeah.
Because Dongding is famous for charcoal roasted tea, and in this area, like charcoal roasted oolong.
So the roasting for you is kind of like, that's kind of what tea was normally like.
Yeah.
And then, recently there has been a trend to lighter, less oxidized teas in Taiwan. But one of the cool things I think about the Western or the international tea market is that it's always good to know what's happening in the local market.
Exactly.
But we don't need to do exactly the same thing as in the local market. In Yunnan, they only drink sheng pu'er, they only drink raw pu'er. They're very picky, they only drink it from a couple mountains. And I kind of almost think that's like a mistake in the sense that there's a lot of great pu'er out there, but people kind of get stuck in a loop, like drinking the same types of tea. So do you feel like being part of the tea family and seeing the many different types of tea makes it easier for you to try different teas?
Yeah, that definitely gives me a more exposure to different diversities of tea. But I think it's very important not to be biased when tasting tea, because a lot of masters, you spend the whole life making just one type of tea, and you can be thinking that, oh, this is the best, this is the truth, it should be like this.
Yeah.
But I think as a customer, it's very nice to get a mix of. There's no what is right, what is wrong, but there is indeed what is modern, what is traditional. And I think especially Dongding is a good example, because nowadays if you buy Dongding, it will be much lighter than before. So we like to offer traditional because it's not as common to find this anymore, because the older generation, it's only the older generation that are doing the chocolate roasting now.
Well, maybe we'll be the people to bring it back. Look at that color. Oh man, very cool. So so tell me more about the charcoal roasting itself. So how does it work from like the sort of the beginning to the end of it?
So when you want to start chocolate roasting, like our family, we want to make sure, because all the tea, all the oolongs, what do you smell?
It's intense. I like it.
A lot going on.
There's a lot going on. It's just, the roasting, it's almost a more cigar-y, smoky roast than the nuttiness you get from the electric. Because usually it's funny, when I say roasty, really what I'm feeling is that nuttiness. But this really feels more like a roast. It almost feels like you're like cooking barbecue and went a little too far.
Yeah, this is what we call peak of fire, actually, just a little bit before it burns. So on the very tip.
Right on the tip.
So you can feel that almost burn kind of feeling, like barbecue. But it smells very strong, but when you actually taste it, you can take a sip, and it's actually pretty sweet and smooth.
That's good. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, so that's a very interesting flavor because it's both very intense and smoky and dark, but also very smooth.
Yeah, but notice the end, the aftertaste. You can still feel that juiciness.
Yep. And still so like a lot of this is what I notice, the more I hang out with the tea people, the less they talk about the taste and the more they talk about the huigan, like the returning flavor, the aftertaste, because that's where you can tell where the tea is good. If it has a bad aftertaste, you don't really want to drink too much of it. It'll taste good going down, but then you'll be like, oh.
Yeah, because tasting tea is about smelling the fragrance and also the mouthfeel, aftertaste, throat feeling, and how your body feels as well.
I bet this would taste really good if you aged it like 20 years.
Yeah.
It would be really good.
Only if you have that much until then.
If you have that much time, it's going to be hard to keep it from drinking it all. So, so tell us what is the process of making a traditional charcoal roasted tea?
Yeah, so when we are dealing with bowl-shaped oolong as a roaster, I'm not sure about other roaster.
Show over here, we can get it on that camera. Yeah.
So right here, you can have a look. All of the tea, they are bowl-shaped. So before we start roasting, we have to refine the tea first by picking out, destem. We have to destem the extract too long.
So if
when the stem is too long, we have to remove it because stem has the most water. So when you're roasting tea that has too much water, it makes it really hard for the fire to go into the tea. And that will make the tea in the long term being not as good in storage. So first step is always destem the tea in our family, and then we will get to roasting. So we actually start by electric roasting, but it's not a long time that we do electric roasting, because the good thing about electric roasting is very consistent, that we start by building a base first. we give this tea a very good base first, because it's like building a house. You need to not have a nice fundamentals. So, and then you start building up the flavors. So first we are getting rid of the grassy, like unpleasant, odd, like a smell that we don't want in tea. And when the tea is clear, then it's the time that we add flavors. It's like when you're, how would I describe this in food? Like you need to deal with the ingredients first, so it's ready at its perfect conditions to add flavors.
You don't just like throw a carrot in a pot. You might have to skin it.
Exactly. It's like when you're making like maybe meat sauce or white sauce. When you're making pasta, you want to make sure you fry the onion nicely instead of just like smashing all the ingredients all together.
So you can really tell later in the finished dish whether that base was done well.
Yeah.
And the same with the tea.
Yeah, because if the base is not done well, you will feel that it's not as smooth. Yeah, and that's why when the tea is built slowly in the roasting stage, you can really feel that it's very smooth, even though that it's very, very heavy roast. So for us, patience is the key.
Patience is the key.
Yeah.
But also patience takes time and skill. So it's a little bit of a trickiness. If you wait too long or you're taking too much time to make the tea, then maybe the market passes you by.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with artisanal tea making, sometimes you can be a little bit stubborn.
Yeah.
Because you're seeking for what's the best. Being an artist, you will always want to be better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you've destemmed it, you've given it a base roast.
Yeah.
And then what's the next step?
And
for
then
the
after
charcoal
that, we
roasting?
will start the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fire.
And then, so what's the process of lighting the charcoal fire like? Like you take the charcoal and you just throw it in, or how do you arrange it? What's it look like?
So you saw how big of a chunk.
Yeah,
of
we
a-
saw it was really cool that your granduncle had this giant piece of longan tree. And it looked like a tree, and like I know it sounds stupid, but I don't know if I've seen a piece of charcoal that.
I think
was
what
that
you
big.
get for barbecue roasting is just
Yeah.
like tiny one, right?
Yeah, you get briquettes, or like even if you have charcoal, it looks more like the lumps that he had in the big it's not guo. What do you call that? Like 烤箱, like in the big round thing.
Like furnace.
The furnace. But and then you took out this huge piece, and he was saying that even getting the wood now is very difficult.
Yeah, getting the charcoal now is like a fight between if you have the guanxi, if you have the connection.
You gotta
or
know.
not.
You gotta know a guy.
You gotta know somebody.
You gotta know a guy. You get your charcoal.
Yeah.
And why is it so hard?
Because these charcoal that we use, we only use Longyan wood for charcoal roasting. Obviously, you can also use lychee wood or other kinds of wood for charcoal roasting. But Longyan wood is the best because it has the most density. So it gives very consistent fire, and it doesn't have any other smell. Like if you use pine woods, it will have pine wood.
Smell like pine wood, yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, Longyan wood doesn't have that much smell, but it would just be sweet. So that's why we decided to use only Longyan wood. But it's very hard to get because it's very hard to grow. Because for one chunk, the very big chunk that you saw, I think it's around 50 years.
Yeah.
For
So
that big of a chunk.
it's hard to get, and I remember your granduncle was saying, like, if I get 100 pounds, it's 100 pounds less that everybody else has out on the market. Like there's a very small amount of it and so even just getting the wood is difficult. Let's say you've got the wood. It was really funny. Your granduncle showed us his storehouse. He has this like back room, which is all like charcoal bags. He was very proud of this storehouse, which he should be. But it's like, if you didn't know, you'd just be like, oh, there's some bags of stuff. But he's like, no, like, let me show you. Like, and he was like very proud. He's like, well, I got 3 more places like this. I'm rich, baby.
It's like, this is the stock.
Yeah, like if wood was money, then he's
rich.
But so he's got his wood, and then how do you get the fire started?
So you usually have like a fire starter that's powered by gas. Just anything that will make fire,
going.
but it has to be strong enough.
Okay.
And you get that fire going as if you start a barbecue, kind of in this sense. And then you will not roast tea immediately after the charcoal is on fire. Because when Because, okay, so first you have to break the big chunk of charcoal into small pieces. Because if you just throw in the big charcoal into this space, there are still a lot of gaps in space.
And the goal is to keep the heat very even, right?
Exactly. So you need to make sure the space is filled evenly. So that's why we need to smash it with something heavy. And
What
then,
is the heavy object that you smash it with?
well, he used different stuff, but I've seen people using like another wood chunk.
Yeah.
Like smash it. Like you can do whatever you want. Be creative.
Yeah, okay. So you smash it into chunks, you get it very even, you get it lit, and then how do you regulate the heat? Or do you just put it right on the fire?
So after you get the fire going, you still cannot roast the tea for maybe about a day because the fire is still quite inconsistent. It's just like when you just start barbecue, the fire is just like woo.
Yeah.
So we will let the fire settle, and then at the beginning, how you control temperature is by how much ash you cover on. There's no a bottom that you can press. So you can like 100 degrees.
So it takes a lot of like experience to know
Exactly.
when you add this much ash, how much it's going to, the ash will dampen the fire. Is that right?
Yeah, it will
Yeah.
fill the space
Yeah.
between the charcoals, and the more ash you cover it with, because inside it's still burning, but it also make it burn slower. So the more ash you cover it, the slower it burns, and the lower temperature it will be.
I remember your granduncle showed me, he took a scoop of this ash and he's like, this one scoop, it took like 60 gin, which would be like what? Like 30
36
kilos?
kilo.
Yeah, 30 something kilograms of wood to create this one scoop of ash. And so even the ash itself is like,
Very precious.
you can't just buy the ash. You know?
Yeah, so you keep it as a precious thing.
Yeah. So that ash is going to be laid down on the fire. You wait a day or so to get the heat even, and then what's the next step?
Also, for the ash, it depending on how heavy you press it.
Oh, okay.
Just
so
like making an espresso.
Yeah. Okay.
People can be very specific about how hard you press it, right? So kind of like that. And then so after that, you can start roasting the tea that it's a little bit rougher, because you don't want to start by a very gentle tea. By gentle tea, I mean high mountain oolong, like a very, very high elevation oolong. And because it's very low oxidized, so lightly oxidized teas, because it's lightly oxidized, so it doesn't have that much to play with. So for people who are roasting tea, they always want to pick the material that is a bit more oxidized, because when it's more oxidized, it have more elements to play with in the roasting process. So we will start by tea that's more rough, like you can use a higher fire, and it usually would be the tea that you already roast for a few times already. Like maybe it's a tea that is already on like third roast or fourth roast, that is already tough enough to take on this.
Yeah, because if you blast the young leaves or the fresh leaves with the fire, then they're gonna what happens to them? What is the
They will
flavor?
just get burned.
They just get burned, and then it just tastes burned.
It will taste very. It will bring out stringency and bitterness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you will strategically, once you light a new fire, you know ahead of time what tea you're going to roast first and what tea you're going to roast second and third.
You need to plan out your schedule.
So how does that planning look? Like, do you have a book? Is it just all in your head? Like,
It's all in your head.
It's all in your head.
You will have to decide on, like for him, he also roasts for people. So he will have different materials on the hand. So he will have to plan out, like this person has a more gentle tea, so I will roast this first. And so sometimes you might have to get in the line for a few months or when he has a bigger odor.
This was one thing that was fascinating for me, because before I got into tea, I was just like, there's a tea farmer, he makes the tea. But actually there's like everything from like, the farmer owns the land and rents the entire plot of land to another family to take care of the trees, and then they do everything. And then there's like the farmer will grow the tea but like hire other people to pick it and take it away. And then there's like the farmer will manage everything up until the point where they sell all their tea to somebody else and they deal with it.
Yeah.
And then there are people that take it through every different step of the process up until the point where it's fully processed and ready to go and put out to market. And it's part of the reason why tea is a little bit hard I think this is why it's a little bit hard when people in the West say like, who made this? Well,
Yeah, there will be a long list.
yeah, because I know it sounds like you want to know one guy made the whole thing, but it's pretty unusual for one person to go from like growing the leaves to picking the leaves to making the leaves to
Exactly.
processing the leaves to marketing the leaves. It's pretty unusual.
We might need a book for
Yeah,
who
yeah,
made
yeah.
this.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's sometimes it's also a little bit hard to know, you know, because stuff.
Because there are so many layers. Because even in the productions, each department does its thing. So after the tea is being picked, the picking is one department. In a larger size tea farm, like a high mountain oolong, like in our family, our Chilai farm is separated into 4 departments. The picking is one group, and then the withering is one group, and stir fixing, kill green is one group, and then the shaping is another group. But where in regions like Baozhong, like in Pinling, because it's spiral shaped, so you don't have to go through the shaping process, so that you don't have to have one group of people, and it's very labor intensive.
Yeah.
But for Baozhong, it's very likely that just one family within a family you can finish this batch. And it's usually smaller batch.
Yeah. So for instance, so our box, we have 4 teas. And so these are all coming from your family or the surrounding area, or your family. You might have grown some of them or bought some of them, and you might have processed some of them. And then, but between all of them, you're kind of having your hands on some part of the journey, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is part of the thing where it's hard to necessarily say like, oh, this family is from this mountain and they make this tea. It's like, it's always a cooperation. I almost feel like you've even said that other people around Taiwan, if they want charcoal roasted tea, they have to go to your granduncle, basically.
Not that they have to.
Well,
there
then-
are options, but
Yeah.
but there are not many charcoal roasting masters.
So it's like one of those things where like your family may have a hand in many different tea shops around the country.
And also another insider thing is that tea making, like the masters who make the tea, they actually like the high mountain regions. These tea making master, it's like a tour. It's like you do the comedian show, you do a tour in different cities.
Yeah.
So these master will work in different mountains.
Are they funny?
They're pretty funny. They like
Actually, your
drinking.
granduncle is really funny.
Yeah.
You know, cut to some of his like facial expressions. It was funny. We were doing the whole charcoal roasting thing, and he had the mask on, but like his eyebrows.
Yeah.
He's like, when I got something wrong, he's like, no, he's wrong.
Speaks with his eyebrows.
Yeah, he's so funny. So they do these tours, and what's the point of the tour?
So usually it happens with high mountain tea masters. So usually I told you that there are 3 departments that handle the tea making, right? So the withering, also kill green, and also shaping. So this usually comes in a whole group of masters, and there will be maybe, let's say like 10 people in withering. And
So they go
then
on tour together, like comedy.
Yeah,
It's all like comedy.
exactly.
It's like stand up
It's like-
all the way down. It's like it's like the kings of comedy.
Yeah.
The kings of kill green. They're killing it. It's even more like
Exactly.
comedy. Oh my gosh.
But it mostly happens in high mountain oolong makers because when they can do tea in different elevation. Because let's say in winter the higher elevation will harvest first, and the lower elevation will harvest later. So you can time out like.
So they're basically just kind of going down a mountain very slowly.
Yeah. So like in spring it's going up, and then in in terms of elevations, and then in winter it's going down.
But it sounds exhausting. It sounds like it'd be very
it's
like,
a very
tiring.
exhausting job, and it's very seasonal because
So
you work for 4 seasons a year, and it's very labor intensive.
Yeah. So again, if people are like, "Oh, the tea is really expensive," it's like there is a reason why the tea is expensive. It's not just like somebody made it up and like, oh, they don't know any better. Like, especially in the Western market, people forget we have to compete with the Taiwanese market for these teas. We don't get to choose the price of the teas. The Taiwanese market, or when I'm in China, like there's a pu'er market. I don't get to just choose what I want to pay for the raw pu'er. Like we have to actually compete against the people who love collecting pu'er. And so a lot of times my choices about what tea I get is I'll look for what's popular in a certain area and then I'll avoid it. Because I'm like, it's not that it's bad, it's because
It's hard to get.
it's hard to get, like, there's some, like, if you want Bingdao pu'er, it's really expensive. But if you go a couple kilometers over, it will be different tea. It's not the same tea. It's not like Lao Bingdao, but it's really good.
Right.
And for Americans or for Europeans that have never had pu'er before, I would rather be able to give them more different types of a tea like that than be like, I'm going to give you 10 grams of Lao Banzhang and like, what does that really do for you? It doesn't help you on your tea journey to have like one blast of this really amazing tea. Although I will say, I was at Lao Banzhang last summer. It was really good. And we do have a Lao Banzhang white tea coming out. But I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. It's a secret. It's coming out in the future, vague future, maybe. I don't know. It is always a little bit of that balance to figure out how to do it. So let's continue on the process. So you've reached the roasting stage. It's getting back to the roasting process all the way through. You've had the fire running now. Now let's say the fire is smoothed out a bit, and it's a couple days into the roast. How long does it take to smooth out the fire?
Like you can use the fire for about 2 weeks, but depending on how you use it. And like for my grand uncle, he roasts tea slowly. He liked I would usually say like the yin and yang. Like yin is like slower, or like more like slowing, and the yang will be like you will feel the fire.
Power.
The fragrance might be higher, but I think the yin part of like the yin style of charcoal roasting, the texture is smoother.
So he'll keep it on the fire for how long?
You mean how long
How long is a roast? Like if you have the tea on top of the fire, it's on this big like sieve,
okay, so
basically.
if you're in the process of
in the process
roasting,
of roasting, what is it
so
like?
depending on what kind of roast you're going for, and also what temperature you're at. So in order to roast this one, the temperature can be very high as around like 130 degree or even more sometimes. And when temperature is this high, you have to flip the tea around 18 minutes, 20 minutes.
So what do you mean flip the tea?
So you have to, so all the tea will be in a bamboo basket, and then there is also wired, so the wire gets very hot. And so if you don't like pour it out and then like pour it in again, so the bottom tea will be burned and the top it's not that roasted. So just make sure it's even.
Yeah. So you'll take the tea out, and you showed me you take the tea and you like flip it onto another like a big dish basically, but a big dish.
Yeah.
And then that allows the tea to kind of even out, and then the next time you put it back, and then you rest it, or how long? So let's say you take the tea off, you put it into the big dish, and then how long do you leave it
You
there?
usually put it back onto the fire because it's very important not to have inconsistent. You shouldn't have a crazy curve when you're roasting tea.
So you want to get that tea right back onto the fire.
Yeah.
And so when you rest the tea, it'll be at the end of the whole day of roasting.
It will be the end of this 8-hour period of roasting. Then you will let it rest for a few days until you roast it again.
Wow. And so then so the roasting process is then complete, and then and then you have the number of like when we say this is a 2 or this is a 5, that's how many days of this cycle it has gone through. So we have on the box, we have a 2 and we have a 5. Is that right?
Exactly.
So the 5 is the roastiest you make.
Yeah.
That's what we're drinking
Heaviest.
right now. So it's a great experience. I think this is the thing that's kind of fun for me about tea is you don't need to love every tea to the extent you're going to drink it every day. Although obviously we kind of hope you guys will be drinking tea every day. But just experiencing the different teas is already kind of fun. And it's because tea is something you can make for multiple people. Like how many steeps do you think you can get out of this heavy roast?
A really, really heavy roast. So you can start the temperature low and then build it up. So you can, I would say up to 15, 20.
Big, so like...
It really, it's hard to tell you exactly how many brews because your definition of when this tea is done.
Yeah, and it depends
on
the size of the vessel and the water temperature.
Exactly, and how you brew it. I think more than 10 is no problem.
But I remember I had a small amount of a 30-year age white tea that I got from a friend of mine in Beijing. And I went to the World Tea Expo in Las Vegas. And after the expo, we had just a meetup with a bunch of tea friends at a friend's tea house, and I broke out the 30-year white tea. And it was expensive. I think I like put it out, it was something like $20 US worth of tea that wound up being in that one gaiwan. But on the other hand, I was like, I just got to have tea with 8 people, and it was a really kind of like, it was an event. You know, $20 to have an event for 8 people is not that bad.
Exactly. I think tea culture, especially in Taiwan, a lot of people think that tea culture is very strict. You have to sit straight, you have to be so formal, like how you should do it, like, you know, very precisely. But tea is in the culture in Taiwan, and tea is our everyday life. It's a way of how we interact with each other. You drink tea with friends, with family. There's these kung fu brewing style. It's small portions, so there's always motions on the table. So you won't feel awkward even if you're not talking.
That's great. Well, that's a great place for us to get ready to end. Before we end, though, we have a couple of things that I want to talk about. One is just to have a little bit of a lightning round, where I'll say something and give me a very short response to it. The first one is just going to be to describe the 4 teas that are in the box.
Okay.
So the first is, how would you describe the Ali Shan Jing Xuan?
I would say it's very crispy and it's very gentle, very soft, got a very like pleasant aftertaste.
Nice. How would you describe the 2 out of 5 roast we had in the first half?
It's like a nice entry to charcoal roasted tea because it's not like it's not the heaviest, so it would be nice to try this one first and then go deeper.
Very cool. How is the red oolong? We went this whole time, we didn't even talk about the red oolong, which is a very unusual new style. Maybe you'll have to come on the podcast again sometime. But how would you describe the red oolong?
The red oolong that we have in the box is citrus. It's very sweet. It's coming from the roasting itself, which is really nice, coming from the tea maker. And brown sugar, just something really sweet. Because when you open the lid, even the gaiwan is warm up, you can feel the fragrance wanting to just come out.
It's really good. That's the one I think a lot of people is going to become their everyday tea. It's like a very easy to drink everyday tea. And then how would you describe the 5 out of 5 heavy roast that we just had?
It's like a nice to convert coffee people into tea. So if you have coffee friends, this is a great tea to convert them into tea people.
Fantastic, really, really great. So another couple quick, just lightning round responses. Personal preference, gaiwan or teapot?
Oh, gaiwan.
Gaiwan, okay. Personal preference, like light oxidized oolong or heavy oxidized oolong? Heavy. That was quick.
We're roasters,
we're
so
roasters.
and it's also more traditional.
Yeah, very cool. Would you rather have the dongding or qilaishan?
Oof, hot take. Those are still my family, you know,
both
depending on the day, they're all good.
这个说得好，还有技巧啊。
Yes.
Very good. And I would just say, what is something that you would like to say to people that have maybe never even tried oolong tea, about what they should be looking for if they were to try some of the teas in the box?
I think just come with an open mind and just take it as you're exploring a new area and a culture. And Taiwanese oolong is very interesting with all the tasting notes that you can have fruity, floral, and even honey notes, and all of these are natural. So what's very special about these high quality artisanal tea is that all the flavor you will taste, they're all natural, and that's the amazing part.
Don't need to add any sugar. And goodness knows, because I get enough added sugar in other parts of my life. I'm like, this is the healthiest part about the tea for me is I'm not drinking junk. So if I can drink tea all day, I'm not drinking junk all day, which is good. So thank you again so much for being on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. This was a very pleasant surprise for me. I really arrived in Taiwan having no idea what I would be doing with this mystery box. That's why it was a mystery. It was even more of a mystery for me than it was for you. And in meeting with a lot of tea farmers and tea suppliers, I really just got the feeling like you understood what we were trying to do better than everybody else. Maybe that was because you had been, trying to express tea in the West before, but I think also to some of its personality, you're willing to try something a little different, which is really cool. And so when you guys get those teas in the box, if you pre-order it or whether you're watching this later and you can just get one, a lot of this is thanks to Jayme and then her work on helping pick out the teas, and also in fighting the packaging companies to package it, having a full-on war with the packaging companies who did not want to pack little bags.
Tiny.
But that being able to do that means that we get to have you guys try some without having to put down huge amounts of money on each tea, and that's, I think, that's the way I want to do tea for people in my community. And so I'm glad that you were able to help out with that, because it's not easy. So thank you again. If you have not followed already, follow the channel. If you have not subscribed, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you're watching on video, don't forget that we have a full hour-long version of this that is on the audio podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're like, wow, this was an interesting conversation, I want to hear more, there's even more that are in the video highlights. And I just really hope we can get to the point where we have this great platform to be able to share all sorts of great tea people. And if you guys really support me, I may actually be able to come back to Taiwan again, which would be a lot of fun.
More tea content.
So thank you again. All the stuff, all the teas, tea equipment, tea stuff, it's all on the website, jessesteahouse.com. And I can't wait to be getting some of these teas into your guys' mouths. That sounded weird. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna leave.